let's look at what Suha practice would look like. You can deepen meaning and purpose in life. And one way of doing this is to reflect on what are things you've done more than a year ago that you still feel good about today. And I'm just going to invite you to write those in the chat window. What have you done more than a year ago that you're still happy about now? Janice, I'm seeing grandparenting. Laura, I'm saying there was a job that you left. Melina, that you joined the International Listening Association. Any others you want to pick up, Madeline? Things that you're seeing there?
There's such a range, actually. It's really inspiring. Um, you got parenting as well as grandparenting, which is good. I like this about, yeah, the leaving the job, that it can be things that we actually walk away from as well as things we do. The women's listening space, and that's, oh, they were together. Planting wildflower meadow and restoring the pond, planting trees, finished a quilt, caring for a friend who's suffering from addiction, participating in Zoom knit night, developing my yoga teaching, active listening, knitting for charity, joined the Action for Happiness movement, reducing waste. I'm loving this great abundance of different individual things.
And what you're describing here are stories of happiness. Mike planting two apple trees. And the wonderful thing here, planting two apple trees is a wonderful example of a story of happiness because happiness is often thought of as a fleeting experience that disappears very quickly. And there's also an idea that if you seek happiness, that you won't find it, that it's just a byproduct of kind of getting on with your life. But actually, I think you can lean into a story of happiness. And planting apple trees, I think the great thing when you plant a fruit tree, you're actually planting something that will bring happiness year after year after year. And that some trees, they don't even get really productive until they've been around for quite a while. And so you might actually be planting happiness that's experienced by people who aren't even born yet. Now let's just take that in, that you could do something that will help happiness for somebody who's not even born yet. Now, I think that's just like amazing because what we're looking at here is how you can take an action that puts out ripples of well-being that are experienced in elsewhere in time and space. And that's the opposite of unsuha. Unsuha is a contraction of happiness. It's happiness in the moment that takes it from somewhere else in time and space. Suha is where you do something in the moment that might still be experienced with satisfaction a year later, that might still be experienced with satisfaction years later, but by other people as well as yourself. Now, this is really the challenge of our whole generations living now, because you can have the effect of a hangover, but even worse, on a massive social scale, where we kind of look up one day and just kind of sigh when we think, what have we done to the world? What have we done that we're inflicting on future generations? That's the Unsuha story. Whereas it's kind of saying, what is it I want to be part of? What's the story that I want to happen through me? How can I be part of a story that's richly satisfying, that contributes to well-being experienced not just by me, but by others too? Not just in this time, but in other times too. So this is the kind of promise of Suha. And what we're doing here is we're looking at an experience called afterglow. Afterglow is the warm feeling of satisfaction that we get after, it could be after we've done something that we feel good about, but it could also be after something that someone else has done that we feel good about, or something that we feel part of collectively that we feel good about. And in terms of good feelings, there's feeling things that are pleasurable is often talked about as a hedonic well-being, the path of pleasure. Chocolate ice cream, I'm a great fan of chocolate ice cream. But it's the things that feel nice in the moment, but you don't particularly feel good about it the next day, and sometimes it may even be regret. But there's doing good, or doing things that we feel good about. And this is often described, the word here is eudaimonic, is a different pathway to well-being, eudaimonic well-being, a path of purpose. And research shows that when people score low on eudaimonic well-being, there are kind of questionnaires for this, that the kind of happiness that comes from doing things that you feel good about, following a sense of purpose, that they are 7 times more likely to be depressed in their mid 60s. And that when you look at what predicts suicide rates in a country, it's not so much levels of happiness, but it's levels of meaning. That when you have low levels of meaning, you tend to have higher suicide rates. So if we want to design a well-being strategy that's going to protect our mental health, then something that strengthens our sense of being part of a story of happiness can play a very major part in that. I love the idea of the me, you, and us model of well-being. And me is about self-care, things that we do for our own personal development and well-being and happiness. You is about where there's someone else you're involved in supporting, and it might be informally, but it might also be professionally. You might be a coach or a helper, a teacher, a therapist, health professional, whatever it is. But you might also be a parent, a friend, a neighbor, a member of a community. So there's the you side of helping others. And then there's also the us side of well-being, collective well-being, particularly looking at the threats to collective well-being around at the moment, like climate change, the mass extinction event that's happening in our world, but also the massive inequality where huge numbers of people are hundreds of millions of people don't get enough calories each day to meet their basic needs. So these are the kind of threats to our collective well-being. Now, Afterglow, you can look at Afterglow at each of these levels. You can say, what have I done more than a year ago that I'm happy about? But you could look at a friend, think of a friend and think, what have you done? What has someone else done more than a year ago that I'm happy about? And then you can also look at our membership of communities or groups that have been involved in something. You might not necessarily have played a particularly big role, but you showed up and were part of a process that you look back and you think, oh, I'm glad that happened. It might be a community garden. It might be a movement that you were part of. It might be a campaign. That when you're a member of a group that's done something you feel good about, that's collective afterglow. And so these are the different levels of afterglow. But in terms of Suha as a practice, I want to introduce this idea of these 3 elements of there's an inner shift, and an inner shift might be in how I think about happiness, what I give my attention to, what I focus on, what memories I search out and give attention to. That there's all kinds of inner shifts that can support well-being, but there's also a self-talk. Self-talk is like a phrase. So I'm going to introduce this idea, like with Afterglow. You might just say Afterglow, Afterglow, and what you're doing is you're calling yourself into that activity. And I'm going to introduce also the idea of a body action. Someone's talking about bringing this into yoga, but we can also bring yoga into this. And there's a number of reasons why body actions can be incredibly helpful. And I think that I was speaking to somebody just the other day, and they say that there's such a tendency in psychology to think of people as brains on sticks. And it's a bit like, the brain and the mind. But when you're doing psychological change, if it's something that's only in the head, it may not engage you as fully. And if you kind of think, how do I embody this? How do I really move my whole body with this moment, this movement? And so I want to introduce this applied to Afterglow. And my friend Rosie did these lovely pictures. So if we think of Afterglow, there's three movements. So first you have your head, and you're holding your head with your hands. We did this earlier, just holding your head like almost like massaging your head. And this is the motion for searching your memories. You might try this now if you like. Searching your memories. What have I done more than a year ago? What's someone else done more than a year ago? What's maybe something I was part of more than a year ago that I still feel happy about now, that I'm glad about? And when you've got that memory, then stretch into it, holding your arms out. You take in that memory, imagine yourself back there in that moment, and you savor it. And then you bring your hands to your chest, and that's the glow. Harvest the warm feeling of satisfaction. I'm going to suggest that we try this now. Afterglow. See if we can see the gallery. After this is scanning the memories, and you might think, and this is something you can do daily practice. Afterglow. Now you might not do this while you're sitting on the bus. You might not do this at the dinner table, not the movement, but in the same way you wouldn't do yoga necessarily or Tai Chi actually while you're sitting in the bus or while you're in the queue for something. But it's something you can do as a practice